From County College of Morris, this is CCM All Access.
Hello, and welcome to CCM All Access, the show that brings you news and information from the County College of Morris. Students at CCM, members of the community, people doing good things. I'm Daniil Barkov, and joining me today is Professor Stephen Pellegrino, who teaches in the Communication Department here at CCM. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you again, Daniil.
Thank you so much for coming on. So, I was wondering, can you please tell us a little bit about what you do here at CCM?
Well, I teach primarily speech fundamentals, which is like oral presentation. And I'm this semester teaching my 32nd section of speech fundamentals. I taught my first one way back in 1993.
Wow.
And then I did a few sections, went on to another thing, came back in 2004, and I've been teaching speech. I've been teaching English Comp 1. I've been teaching writing skills. So that's basically what I've been doing.
Have you taught at any other schools aside from CCM?
I taught it at Fairleigh Dickinson for a number of years in the Madison campus, teaching freshman writing.
Oh, wow, okay.
And did that for a while and then came back here. I was a student here, I've taught here, and now I'm still teaching here.
So you've been with the CCM experience for a good portion of your life, basically. You've seen a lot of transitions and changes here on campus, correct?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So can you actually tell us about some of the changes that you've seen, maybe in both students and maybe as the campus as well here at CCM?
Well, we have a lot of new buildings that we never had before. The library is bigger than it ever was. We have a new manufacturing center going up, right? We never had solar panels before in the parking lot. So yeah, it was a lot more quaint, you might say, in the old days, but now it's state of the art as far as I can tell, and that's a good thing.
So through your teachings here at CCM, because I'm sure you've definitely seen a big change in students and basically the way that public speaking has, I guess, altered throughout the years. So can you tell us a little bit more about some things that you've noticed?
Well, I think you've noticed some of the same things too. I think the great revolution is computers, the internet, the smartphones. You know, if somebody came back from the 80s and went ahead in time to our day, he would say, why are all these people walking around with these little pocket calculators, right?
Yeah.
And but they're cell phones, see. Yeah. And yeah, so because of that, I believe research is so much easier because you can go on the internet and you can search for things. And it's when I was in college, we had to go to the library, look up microfilm, individual magazines, all kinds of newspaper articles, and now we just search online. So, and we also have a lot of tools here we didn't have before. As you saw when you were in our class, we showed YouTube videos. People created PowerPoint presentations and slides and things like that. So it opens up all these wonderful worlds of creativity that we never had before.
So so you listed a lot of positive effects of it. Have you seen any negative ones, maybe of this whole social media aspect right now?
Well, do you think that students today have less attention span?
I do. I do think so. I feel like it probably definitely affects the way, because I know a lot of students, at least in our class, had some trouble, actually communicating to a large group of people. And I'm sure you've definitely seen that throughout the years, but do you think it's gotten worse?
I don't know. I mean, people are still people, and it's true technology changes people, but inherently we're genetically people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the problems we have are some of the age-old problems, like stage fright, nervousness before going on. But people rise to the occasion, I have found. I think you found that too, didn't you? That, when you're told that you have to present something extemporaneously, just maybe an outline, not reading directly off text, some people are a little nervous about that. Yeah. But I tell them, you ought to know your story, you ought to know your topic so well that you can tell it well. And guess what? As you saw, people rise to the occasion, don't they?
I also believe that the way you presented like assignments to us, where we were able to pick basically the thing that we wanted to speak about, made it a lot easier. And I know our class we had some very hard-hitting stories, but I think that definitely helped out with a lot more. Because I know my first presentation when I did the folk tale, I wasn't the best at that, but I believe I improved throughout the semester.
Well, I've noticed, yeah, I've noticed that same pattern because I think my experience has been when you start out, you have a certain skill set. But as we keep doing it, we keep doing it, we keep doing it, we learn by experience. And I said to the students, I said, don't you think when we were doing the third and last presentation, don't you think that the quality has gone up from where we were before? And everybody kind of agreed, yes, it has. So it's working.
Yes.
The thing is working.
So what techniques throughout your years of teaching have you decided to utilize that you found work better than I guess some that you found out have not worked?
Well, I think you know I believe in being very open and very direct and letting students, as you said, pick their own topics because I think they're the best judges of what they can do best. I believe in that old saying, you know, the good teacher takes out of his treasure chest something old and something new. So we do historical things and we do very modern, cutting-edge things. And sometimes I'll try some new technique in a classroom, and either it's a hit or it doesn't work out so well. So if it's a hit, I say, okay, that worked. I'll retain it for future classes. If it didn't work, well, it didn't work. And so now I won't do that anymore. But you always have to be, you know, constantly honing and refining your craft, right?
Yes, and I know you showed us in the class some, we saw different types of basically ways of communication from like 50 years ago and then going forward
Right.
basically, and you could see how much everything has basically changed, even the way people talk now, and I think that was really interesting to see how different ways of presenting, I guess, kind of affected the emotional response you would get from, I guess, the advertisements or the different things that we saw.
Right. We looked at commercials from the 50s and
Yeah.
how they you know, even if you took a television set and had it on, and you have a movie or a commercial on from the 50s, and you're in another room, you can tell just by the voice that this is something from that time. And so, how does that change over time? The most interesting one for me, at least, that I remember showing was, and people can actually look this up on YouTube. There's a video of someone who lived in our own county, Pompton Plains, New Jersey. And he was born in 1829. His name was John Voorhees. And they recorded him speaking in 1929, which was the first year of talkies, talking motion pictures. And it was interesting just to hear him talk and the way he put his words together and the enunciation and everything. He was somebody, if he was born in 1829, who learned to talk listening to people who were around in the 1700s.
Yeah.
So to me, that was really a time capsule, and it's from right out here in our local area. So that's what someone who lived in Morris County, that's the way he talked. And it was somewhat different, but we could understand him, right?
We could understand him. There's definitely some parts that were a little, I guess, confusing, just the way that he presented his
Well,
things.
he was 99
Yeah,
years old.
yeah.
You got to give him a little
But
bit.
it was really interesting to see that because you don't really, I guess you don't really think about, like, can you imagine what people 200 years ago were even talking like and how things have basically evolved and changed? And I guess a question that I have with that is, how do you think now with all of the technology and social media that we have, how do you think stuff is going to change in the future?
Will we even have the established spelling that we have? Will we still write Y-O-U, or will we just do a letter U,
Like
right?
emojis and stuff?
Right.
Yeah,
Will
yeah.
we talk in memes and
Yeah.
emojis and stuff? The guy from Pompton Plains, he said, he sounded like this. I was born in Pompton Plains, New Jersey, and I moved to New York City in the year 18. Yeah, he sounds almost a little bit British,
Yeah.
right? So we've kind of gotten away from that. America's been separate from England for
Good long
over
while.
2 centuries. And so these changes somehow occur. If we went ahead 100 years or 200, if someone's watching this decades, centuries from now, this will seem very quaint.
Yeah.
But we're just doing it because this is the time we live in and we're a product of our times, right? Whether we like it or not.
I do believe though that a big, I mean, I know you've noticed it for me, and we've talked about this before, is a lot of people my age use fillers in sentences, and I think that drastically affects the way we present things. So have you noticed that with technology going up, it's gotten worse, basically? Like I just did right there.
Like, you know, when somebody like keeps saying like every like 2 minutes, you just like want to punch them.
Yeah.
Well, we don't condone
Yeah.
violence. Anyway, well, there was an origin that, where did that come from? And it turns out it actually came from the whole beat scene back in the 50s. And that got into movies, and it got into TV, and then because we all learn by imitation, right? So the reason people do those things is because they heard it from someone else or on television. How did we learn to talk when we're 2, 3, 4 years old? We learn by imitation. So we internalize everything we hear. It's an amazing thing what the human mind can do. And it can only be done at that age. And then once you have that, you have that. Now, I believe, and I think you'd agree with me, what we try to pursue is a very professional tone of speaking, right? That there's something for the professional world, and there's something for, you know, being informal and with your friends,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So as I have pointed out, we're not trying to change you as an individual. We're just trying to make you the best version of you that you can uniquely be. But I think there is a certain professional way of doing things, and that includes presentation, speaking, right? That's the whole purpose of the whole thing.
I actually, so what you're basically saying about, from what I've at least started to believe, is I think a lot of these fillers and the way that we have, I guess, two separate ways of communication is mainly due to a lack of, I guess, reading in a way in my generation. I think we use fillers in a way because we don't, I guess, stimulate our mind with reading as much as the older generations did, and that helped them develop a stronger vocabulary.
I'm not sure why the fillers became so prominent. I do agree with you that I have noticed that the students who write on their little introduction cards that one of their hobbies or they like reading, students who have read a lot seem to do much better in these classes than students who haven't. And that's just the thing. So I would say reading helps people with speaking.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And now we're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
I'm Andrea Lucia, a graduate of County College of Morris. At CCM, I gained a high-quality education, was involved with clubs on campus, and performed university research in tissue engineering. My CCM education prepared me for ongoing success. Today, I am at Cornell University, studying engineering and performing research in cardiac tissue engineering. The professors and staff at CCM helped me to start right and finish strong.
And we are back on CCM All Access. I am Daniil Barkov, and we are here with Professor Stephen Pellegrino. So, Professor, can you please tell us what makes CCM such a special place?
Well, lots of things. First of all, as a community college, it has an excellent reputation. And I think that's because of the people here, the people, not just the facilities, which are also excellent, as I've said before, but the people. We've had people here who have been here since the very beginning, way back in the 60s and 70s. They're still here. And there's the low-cost aspect, right? The convenience aspect. We're right on Route 10, and it's easy access from all parts of Morris County and elsewhere. So it's got a lot of pluses. It's got a lot of pluses. The small class sizes. I believe there's a certain spirit of community and camaraderie between the professors and the students because we're in a small, intimate space. We get to learn each other's names. We get to make personal connections, business connections, academic connections. It's very friendly, very open, has a lot of good things going for it.
I do believe that at CCM, since it's such a smaller community, it's even when you see your professors outside of class, it's you still communicate with them, so it makes it much more like a tighter knit community, like you said.
Absolutely.
And I know you said that I understand that you actually have a history with CCM. You attended here when you were younger, right?
Right. I started right, as the billboards say. if you've seen those billboards.
I have, yes.
But it goes back even further than that. My father visited this place, which is the Dalrymple Farm. That's the man who owned this property. The Dalrymples are an old Scottish family, goes way back to the 1800s. And this was their homestead. And they had an ice business here.
Oh, wow.
And the pond behind the buildings, that was used for ice because people didn't have electric refrigerators. And you needed a source for ice, and they had an insulated building. Well, my father came here in the 50s because his friend, Alan Philp, was a Dalrymple relative, and they used to come up here and shoot skeet. They
Oh,
were
wow.
target shooting right here on this land. And so if you want to consider that a connection, that goes back that far with me.
Wow, okay.
There's even a map in the library showing the old Dalrymple Farm, all the outbuildings and the roads and everything. You know, it's very interesting.
So you had connections to CCM before CCM was even here, basically.
Before I was even born. Yeah.
Wow. So can you actually tell us about, I know you, when you were younger, you still might as well have a hobby of like radio communication stuff. I can tell us a bit about that.
Well, yeah. Speaking of my father, a lot of people don't know this, but if you have a radio, and the typical AM radio goes from what, 55 to 160, right? That's the frequency range. WABC is 77, WOR is 710, you know. So anyway, what's above 160? If you had a radio dial, you could move past the 160. What's up in there?
No idea.
That's shortwave radio, goes from 160 to 30,000 kilocycles. And what you can do, or you can still do this, but when I was doing it in the 80s and 90s and even earlier, was each country has its own shortwave station. And the thing about shortwave that's unique is whereas we in the New York metropolitan area, we get New York stations mostly. And you can't really get stations from Philadelphia or Washington or Harrisburg very easily. So with shortwave, you're bouncing off the ionosphere. You can get signals from Europe, South Africa, Australia, China. And all of these stations had their own little interval signals, which are little songs, so you know that's what the station is. And they'd have broadcasts. And so every country had a station. There was Radio Moscow, there was Radio Kiev, there was the BBC, there was Radio Vatican, there was Radio Peking, it was called at that time, which is now Beijing, China. I knew where Albania was because of shortwave radio, and the capital is Tirana, okay? So, yeah, I was sitting there late at night with my radio, DXing, which means just going across the spectrum, turning the knob, seeing what I could pick up. And that was an interesting hobby. And part of that hobby is, I think I showed this to a class, and that was you send away to the station you received, and you get what's called a QSL card. See, it's a little postcard. And this one is from Radio Moscow. This
Do you mind
is
if I
before
see
the
it? Thank you.
before the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Wow, wow.
And so you had the Soviet perspective on the news and features and things like that. And you'd send away, you'd get that back in the mail, and that's a little souvenir, see? So I have a whole stack of them. I have Radio Czechoslovakia, I have Radio Sweden, I have Voice of America, which was the United States version, and then there are other private, there are a lot of Christian radio stations on shortwave, so people might want to check out shortwave just to see what they can find.
See, I always, when at least understanding of what shortwave radio was, I always thought that it was basically just a limited range that you could go. I didn't realize that you could go all over the world with it, basically, just if you get to like a correct frequency with it.
Right, right.
But so do you think that basically taking this up as a hobby helped you, I guess, develop into like maybe your teaching styles or just the way you see media and how like a communication works?
Well, I've always been kind of interested in stuff like that. I mean, I had a little hobby / business one time. This is before YouTube. See, it was sort of people who remember we watched the commercials.
Yeah.
Okay. before YouTube, if you wanted to see commercials from the 50s, how would you do it? All you had was broadcast TV, and they weren't showing them, right? So there were collectors who had film, who were transferring it to video, and me and my partner and I would put together little programs and sell them by mail, all public domain material. And that was the only way for people to see vintage material at that time because YouTube did not exist.
Yeah.
And so we were selling, for instance, let's say you had a 1957 Chevy and you wanted commercials for the 57 Chevy and the dealer promo films that were made to educate the dealer staff. Those were very interesting to watch, and there was only one place to get it, and that was us. Historic Video Archives was the name of the business. And so we advertised in a lot of different magazines. We sold, old newsreels and old commercials and old industrial films, and all of this stuff now is on YouTube.
Yeah.
So it kind of put us out of business. But the good thing about it is the access is now everybody can access this material and learn from it, right? You can learn from it. So I've always found that kind of stuff to be really fascinating. And so I got a major in communications because, our class, Speech Fundamentals, covers all majors, all disciplines, right? It cuts across all of them because you need them. It's a one skill you're going to need your whole life through.
Yes.
Right? No matter what area of business you go into, what job you take, your own personal business dealings, this is a valuable skill, right? So I believe what we do is very important.
I would agree with you 100% because I know there's definitely a lot of arguments that a lot of students are saying is like, oh man, what am I going to need this class for and this? But speech fundamentals is fundamentally important basically to just anything, a career, communication, just altogether, because you're always going to be talking with people. And I think the best way, specifically, especially now, the better that you know how to communicate, that just boosts you up in either in the career field or just all around in life.
Right, right. Communication is everything almost, right?
The thing you said though about how YouTube basically changed the entire platform is super. It's kind of amazing to me to see that. Like I don't even know how old YouTube is now. 10 years maybe.
I think it started around 2005.
Okay.
But when it started, it wasn't the great resource that it
Yeah.
is today. It was like videos of people visiting the zoo. As a matter of fact, you can look up what is the first uploaded YouTube video, and it's this boring zoo video. It's the most boring thing. But that's all it was. And then slowly people uploaded all these different collections.
Yeah.
And now just about everything's on YouTube,
Yeah,
right?
I believe that it's at this point they were taking like a poll with very young kids, and the majority of them don't even use TV anymore. It's all YouTube basically.
I hardly watch TV anymore, except Channel 77, which is what we're on,
Yeah, of course,
which is a
of
very
course.
good channel. If you're DXing on the cable spectrum and you happen to hit this, stay here because this is good. Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with that 100%.
But it's amazing how much everything's changed in such a short amount of time, and it's also kind of I guess it's a little bit frightening, but also interesting to see where things are going to go from here. What the next step will be.
Well, think of a person who lived, like that man John Voorhees. Think of all the technical innovations he saw in his lifetime, going from horse and buggy in the 1800s to railroads in the mid-1800s to the telegraph, which is the precursor to all of this. Invented right here in Morristown by Alfred Vail. You can go to the museum right on Speedwell Avenue.
I didn't know that. That's
yes,
amazing.
absolutely. And then we had radio, actual voice going through the air. And then we built on that with television. And then we have the internet. And I can actually remember a time when there was no email. Nobody had email. I know, it's hard.
Yeah.
I don't want to scare anybody out there, but this is reality, right? Nobody had an internet connection.
Yeah.
Because there was no such thing. So now we've got the internet. What's coming in the next decades, we can't ever tell. It's like trying to tell somebody from 1880 about our life today. It would be incomprehensible.
Yeah. That's super interesting. I also understand you brought something to share with us here today.
Well, as I said, our speech fundamentals methodology is we go step by step gradually, right? And that is that getting up in front of an audience is kind of daunting, right? So we say, okay, bring in something to read. do your best job reciting, just sitting in your seat. We're not concerned about nonverbal communication. We're not concerned about getting up in front of people. Just doing the very best job from your seat. And people bring in all kinds of things. They bring in poems, song lyrics, parts of novels, play scripts, and they read them in the best, most professional way that they can do. And we talk about how the voice has to match the emotion of what you're reading. Remember, we did Superman. Do you remember that?
Of course.
And all the things about elocution and diction and enunciation and all of that kind of thing. Because, and I tell people, here's your homework, easiest homework of all time, right? Listen to the radio, watch television, watch movies, listen to the narration, watch commercials, listen to the weatherman, the sportscaster. Try to understand and listen to the way they professionally announce. It's an art and a science, right? And so they're not really thinking about that in the beginning, but once they start to think about it and notice these things, they say, aha, I have to be louder, I have to be clearer, I have to enunciate, I have to have vocal variety, I have to have the emotion match what's being read. So it's interesting for people listening, right?
Yeah.
That's what broadcast is all about.
So
a couple of months ago, I discovered this. And I thought this was an interesting thing to read. It's actually, if you can believe this, this song was top of the charts in the year 1953.
oh, wow.
And it's called I Believe. I believe for every drop of rain that falls, a flower grows. I believe that somewhere in the darkest night, a candle glows. I believe for everyone who goes astray, someone will come to show the way. I believe, I believe. I believe above the storm, the smallest prayer can still be heard. I believe that someone in the great somewhere hears every word. Every time I hear a newborn baby cry, or touch a leaf, or see the sky, then I know why I believe. What'd you think of that?
That was you said so it was from the 1950s?
That was actually a hit song in the 50s, and other artists, Frankie Lane, Elvis Presley, and other artists have sung it over the years.
Wow. Honestly, this has been a very interesting interview. This was amazing. Professor, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Daniil. I wish you every success in the world.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on, and thank you so much for helping me with progressing my ability to speak and communicate.
We're all growing. We're all getting better and better.
This has been another edition of CCM All Access. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.